Welcome back to Hotel Talk, and I'm so excited today because I have someone who's not involved in the hotel industry once again, but is a very dear friend and who is connected with hotels in more ways than we know, actually also living in somewhere that was a former hotel. So he is the CEO of Interorient Navigation, the president of the Cyprus Shipping Chamber, the vice chairman of the Cyprus Marine Environment Protection Association, and quite importantly, the vice chairman of the International Chamber of Shipping. Themis Papadopoulos, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here.
It really is. And disclosure, we're friends for many, many years, so we're going to have fun on this one. So, Them, tell me a little bit about you, not me, the listeners, about you, but from the beginning, where you were born, where you grew up,
Sure.
and how you ended up in shipping. Obviously family, but tell us everything. How did it all begin?
So I'm born in Cyprus 48, almost 49 years ago now. Grew up here and eventually got to the UK for university studies, and then pretty much straight back to Cyprus into the family business, which, as you say, is shipping. And that was 27 years ago. So been doing it for a while.
I remember being at your house actually ages ago, and you were like, "Oh, I've been in it. I can't remember. It was 15 or 18."
Yeah.
And that was like the shocker then.
Yeah.
And now we're like,
So
I'm getting to 3
I'm sure
decades.
we'll talk about this a bit later, but shipping is one of these strange industries where you don't ever have 2 days that are the same. So I can honestly tell you, in 27 years, I think I've had, as many different days. It's a remarkable industry in many ways.
So is it something that you very much wanted to go into, or is it something that you felt pulled to go into because of your family business?
I think like every, 20 aspiring and ambitious 20-something-year-old, it's a combination of both. You recognize that it's, you have something there, a platform, a family business that is there, and at the same time, you want to prove yourself and do your own thing and stuff. So I think it's a combination of things. Funnily enough, someone said to me the other day something that I'd never thought about, and it was this. He said, "Do you know anyone that's ever gone into shipping and then left to go into another industry?" And that's so true. Once you're in shipping, it's like a bug that gets you, and you stay forever. So I was bitten and smitten, and here I am 27 years later.
Amazing. And okay, I'm so far from that industry, even though we're all connected to the industry in one way or the other. But tell us more about shipping. Why is shipping so important? I think the pandemic really made it quite obvious to many people, but
really
tell us in more words than that. Why is it so important?
So I'll start with what you said, the pandemic. So, the whole world was shut down. Everything was difficult. Logistics were difficult and all of that stuff. And throughout this impossible period, shipping kept going. So, delivering raw materials, energy, goods, things on the supermarket shelves.
No. Amazon.
Shipping is a bit of a mysterious industry. Not mysterious, a bit of the invisible industry. It doesn't really caught publicity that much, but over 90% of global trade moves on ships. So almost everything that you see around you and that we use in our day-to-day lives has probably traveled by ship at one point or another, perhaps in its raw material form or perhaps in its finished form. But the world simply would stop to function if it wasn't for shipping. And the pandemic, as you say, was a remarkable example of how even in those, very unprecedented and really unthinkable times, we kept going. And that's a huge testament to the men and women on the ships, because they had it much worse than us. We got to quarantine at home in the comfort of our homes with our families, and they were still on ships traveling around the world and doing what they have to do.
Well, we saw many here. I mean, many were outside St. Raphael Marina, and when they were allowed, they were embarking here.
Absolutely. And that was actually, if I can just plug Cyprus here a little bit, that was one of the things that as a country we did remarkably well. During that time, a lot of countries panicked and they wouldn't let you do crew changes and things like that. We had people stuck on board for months on end that were supposed to have been relieved and gone home, but we just physically couldn't get them off because so many countries wouldn't allow travel and crew changes. But Cyprus really stepped up and really took a lead in this, and was one of the really good examples of countries and industry government and industry coming together to create the circumstances to allow things to continue to flow. Otherwise, I would say that shipping is the driver of global trade. Obviously, it provides for, as I say, more than 90% of world trade. And despite a lot of talk about onshoring and the things that have come out as a result of the pandemic, and even if you look at the logistical problems that we've encountered and all the bottlenecks that have happened, they're only due to the fact that shipping had become so efficient and so good at what it does that nobody felt the need to have stocks of anything anymore. Everything was sort of just in time, whether you're a car manufacturer or whether you were a trader. You just relied that the ship would be there the next week at the right time. You'd have your goods. You didn't need stocks or anything. And if we think back 30, 40, 50 years, you couldn't trade in anything without having warehouses and stocks and all these kind of things. So the fact that we moved away from that business model to the just-in-time business model is because shipping became so wonderfully efficient and reliable.
Interesting. And on that note, what causes then the fluctuations in shipping? Because we often hear in Cyprus, so many people are connected with the shipping world, and some years they're saying, oh, it's booming and everything's great, and other years, oh, it's tough times and we're struggling. So what is it then that causes? Because there is obviously a demand always.
The simple answer is supply and demand. So, you've got a certain number of ships to carry out that trade, and depending on what the demand is like in that trade and the number of ships that are available, that then is what moves the needle, just like any other industry, supply and demand driven.
So how does Cyprus fit into all of this? Why Cyprus? I mean, okay, I know a bit, but let's explain to everyone else as well. I mean, why has Cyprus become such a big place for shipping, especially Limassol?
Limassol, absolutely. Well, Limassol is probably one of the shipping centers of the world. I don't like to tell you it's number 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever. These numbers are very arbitrary, but we're one of the main shipping capitals of the world. And this is a history that goes back to the 70s. So there's a longevity to the industry here in Cyprus. It's matured, and that means that I know we host other industries here in Cyprus, but many have kind of passed through and then not stuck around. Shipping, as I say, been here for more than 40 years. There's a track record here. Originally, if we think back to what Cyprus looked like in the 70s and 80s, I think it was very much tax-driven. We had the offshore company concept and structure, so I think they all took advantage of that. But in recent times, at least over the last 20, 25 years, I would say that there's hardly a place in the world that doesn't offer the same tax advantages for shipping companies. So companies aren't here because it's tax-driven. They're here because we've built up an industry, we've built up expertise. There's a whole workforce of people here in Cyprus that are now employed by the shipping industry. When Interorient started in 1979, I think the ratio of expat staff to local staff was something like 80-20 or 90-10 or something. Now we're probably 70-30 the other way. So
imagine the massive shift.
There's been a huge shift, yeah.
So interesting. So tell us a little bit, I've got so many questions here, but about the Environmental Protection Association and sustainability in shipping, because this is a big thing that comes up over and over again. I mean, I hear it so much and I'm not even in your industry. Right. Shipping and sustainability, but sustainability can mean so many things. It can just mean how long can shipping last. Let's talk about the environment and eco-friendly procedures. Is that even possible with shipping? And what's being done about it? You are very much up to date, Farah. So this is the topic of the day. It dominates all discussion on shipping. Look, we're in a world that has rightfully decided that one way or another we need to decarbonize and move our economies away from fossil fuels. Shipping recognizes that it is a contributor to this, and I think has done for some time. But to put things a little bit in context, in fact, I was looking at this the other day. I think something like 17 or 18% of global emissions come from transport sector, and that's excluding cars. So we're talking ships, planes, and trucks, road trucks. And I think it's shipping is something like 2%, aviation is something like 2%, and then the trucks are 13%. And a truck at best can move 1 or 2 containers, whereas a ship can move
hundreds and thousands of containers. It's by far and away the most environmentally friendly mode of transport if you look at it relative to other options. Having said that, as an industry, shipping contributes something like 2% of global emissions as a whole, and whatever can be done to bring that down should be done. And the global regulators have introduced a series of milestones that companies have to meet, which revolve around improving efficiency, improving your emissions, and all these kind of things. But that's not going to get us to a decarbonized industry. To get to a decarbonized industry, we need either technological solutions that are not yet available, or we need what we call alternative fuels that are clean burning. And that could be a number of things, and the jury's still out on what it will be in the end, or many people say it'll probably be a combination of things. But electrification is a solution for cars, or maybe not even all cars, maybe just city cars, because I can't imagine, a truck. A truck that's going, across the US.
States,
That's not a so. There's other industries other
and
than
it's still
shipping.
how is it being made? Because at the end of the day, people think, an electric car, there's no emission. Well, that's just where it's being stored.
Right.
It's still being, made with petroleum or whatever else, unless it's being made by wind or solar, which then goes back to the grid.
Absolutely, and even the current battery manufacturer technologies are very much old school. We haven't had a battery revolution, so we still rely on a lot of mining of nickel and copper and all different kinds of metals to make the batteries. So lithium. So it isn't a solution for everything. It's certainly not a solution for shipping, and there are other industries, heavy industries as well, that electrification isn't really a solution for. So we believe that the future is likely to be, yes, a combination, but most likely involving clean burning fuels of some kind. And as you very rightly say, that the basis for that, the starting point of that, has to be green energy. And that's where I think shipping feels a little bit disappointed in the fact that governments are always pushing industry to do something. But as far as I'm concerned, the low-hanging fruit is power generation. I mean, that's 40% of global emissions, maybe even more. That's around the world, right? So why aren't we doing what Denmark has done and Sweden and maybe Norway, I think, to an extent? Why aren't we doing more renewables? I mean, here in Cyprus, we're
so frustrating. The sun is
300
here.
and whatever days of sunshine a year.
And,
and then we started with wind, and then we realized that might not be the best thing for us, and now we're moving to solar, and now that's kind of reached the bottleneck, and I don't know how many new projects are coming online, but this is everywhere in the world. It's not just in Cyprus. So, governments around the world need to get their act together, need to massively increase renewable power generation, so that then what comes after that, whether it's green hydrogen or whether it's green ammonia or whatever it is that shipping is going to rely on, and other industries, is coming genuinely from a carbon neutral source or a carbon free source. Otherwise, this is not the best example, but to buy an electric car in Cyprus, to then go plug it in the wall where we're still powering our energy from heavy fuel oil, feels a bit of a paradox.
Yeah, unless you've got a good photovoltaic system. So not to say that it's not worth it. I've got a hybrid myself, but still, it's
No.
It's and then I'll go off shipping and be like, and if everybody just stopped eating as much beef, then also that's a much bigger contributor than shipping. Sure. It is, statistically, it is.
No, absolutely.
The agricultural industry.
Absolutely. But just let me say this. I think it's much easier to find solutions technologically than through behavior changes. Very hard to convince seven and a half billion people.
8 billion.
8 billion to change behavior. So I always say, well, let's do what we can. Let's do the things that are within the remit of governments, and that right now is much more renewable power than or at least increase the pace of renewable power from what we're seeing today.
So, what has been the greatest lesson that you have learned so far in your career of so many decades?
The greatest lesson, I think, is how little we know.
Being reminded every day
of how little we know. And this ties a little bit into what I said earlier, that we don't seem to have 2 days the same in shipping.
Yeah.
Sometimes, something will happen and you gather all the experts in the office and they might have a few hundred years of experience between them. And no one's ever encountered this before, and no one knows what to do, and you have to sit and think and work out a plan and make plans. So I think this is the lesson for me. Just be humble, and there's
I
much
love
more
that.
than we don't know than we think we know.
I love that. So who's inspired you the most in life in general?
Well, having worked in the family business and with my father for so many years, I think I'd have to say he's sort of the first inspiration. His demeanor, his way of approaching problems, his calmness, his other people say this to me, but he was a pioneer in the shipping industry here in Cyprus. So I think for us that have kind of come after him and taken over the business, it was a big shoes to fill, and I hope he's looking with a smile at what we're doing, and
I'm sure,
and not with a scowl.
he is. Which leads me on to my next question about you being a daddy. You've got 2 lovely daughters. How do you balance that? Because I have said this before on this podcast. I think women get asked an awful lot, like, how do we manage it? And it is a very, very important topic for women. But it's equally an important topic for men. Men are still,
absolutely.
Fathers are still, need to be there for their families. So how do you manage such a demanding, several roles, and then...
Yeah. And I think a lot more so today. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, and this is terrible to say, but, men weren't really expected
Not at
to
all.
be that involved in,
Not at all. We keep laughing with my husband. He's like, since when do dads go to kids' birthday parties? Like,
exactly.
No one from our generation remembers our dad ever at a birthday party.
Yeah. So absolutely. Look, I should be asking you that, because you're the most multitask person I've ever met in my life. So I need to ask you I need to ask you how you balance it. I think my answer will probably be the same as anyone's. You do your best. You try to be there as much as possible. There are sacrifices that need to be made, and there's also little tweaks you can do. I mean, I travel a lot because this is the nature of shipping, but I've tried to limit my trips as much as possible. And then when I am traveling, I limit the time I'm away as much as possible. I always try to be here on the weekend to make sure we have family time as a family and all of that. But, this is a never-ending battle, as you know, I think best.
It's never-ending. And however much you do, you sometimes feel it's not enough. But I think the main thing, I mean, you've said it now, it's quality over quantity. So when you're actually there,
that's the most important
really
thing.
Be there.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
No.
Because I think whatever we do, we'll always have a little bit of guilt in the back of our minds. Have we done enough? Are we doing it right? Are we this? Are we that? But it doesn't come with a manual, does it? You do your best and hope at the end of the day it turns out all right.
That's what someone said, actually, to someone we know who now lives in America. And I think I've said it before on this, but when you feel that you're not really doing either the best you could, neither work nor family life, that's when you've hit the balance. When you're
the balance.
when you're nailing one, like, I'm nailing it at work,
Right,
I'm
okay. Oh, I
amazing.
see.
You're pretty sure your family's suffering. When you're like, I've been amazing with my family, I've done everything and whatever. Work's probably not thriving as it should. So
we're destined to be tortured forever.
Tortured, one way or another, exactly. Okay, favorite quotes.
Favorite quotes. Winston Churchill is usually my go-to for quotes. Oh my
goodness, I've used him so many times in so many podcasts.
I love his dry sense of humor, so I'm going to go with a Winston Churchill. And my favorite is, success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm.
That is my absolute favorite. I love that. Oh my goodness, Winston Churchill was such a classic. I think everything he said is just... brilliant. And there's so many times to use one of his quotes. Really.
The man had a unique talent for this,
Oh my
didn't
goodness.
he?
Yeah, brilliant. I love I can't remember exactly the few words he wrote, but he failed an essay once. Did you hear that story?
No, go on.
So they told write about, we want you to write a creative essay about watching cricket. And he just put I don't know how many words. It rained, I got bored, I left. And that was it. And they failed him. But he was like, well, it was the truth, There's nothing else to say. So, yeah. Right. Bonus question. Pick any that you want from our crystal ball. This is from our team. So everybody gets a chance, I'll read it to you, to put a question. They don't know who's going to pick it, obviously. Have you learned anything new about yourself recently?
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, every day. Every day. That's the answer, honestly. Every day.
They should have said, what have you learned?
What have you learned? So what have I learned
We
about
all
myself
learn things,
recently?
but what have you learned?
Good question. I think I'm approaching 50, and that's a bit of a seminal moment, at least in a man's life. I don't know.
I think for a woman it's
women
even
as well.
more.
Okay, so let's take 50 as a seminal moment in our lives, and it's kind of the moment where a lot of people, try and take stock and see, have I achieved what I set out to achieve, and my goals and my ambitions, and am I where I want to be in life? But I think what I've come to the realization I've come to recently is that there is no such point in life where you stop and you take stock and you grade yourself or anything like that. It's the classic. It's the journey, not the destination, and that is, I think, something that I've come a lot more to terms with recently than I used to. I always used to think that by this age I'll have done that, and by this age you'll have done that, and all of that kind of stuff. And the folly of youth, I when I look back now, so.
Yeah.
Enjoy the ride and don't worry so much where you are at what point in life. That's my latest.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. We were saying on another episode with Sofia Badaskova that she was saying her 40s are amazing and you don't care so much what people are saying and thinking. And then I mentioned Winston Churchill and his quote that in your 20s you care about what people are saying, in your 40s you stop caring, and in your 60s you realise no one was talking about you in the first place. And I think that there is a lot to be said for for aging, not say aging gracefully, but just getting wiser and more mature and not fearing aging, because it can be beautiful. My mum always told me that. Enjoy every stage, it's all different. And I really liked Jennifer Lopez, actually. I think it was her documentary, but it was called Half Time, because you're only halfway there.
Absolutely.
We live a long life now and we can make the most of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Them. I really, really appreciate
Thank
your
you. I love
time
being
from
here.
your busy schedule. It was nice to see you finally. We need to do more interviews just to catch up.
Yeah. It's great to see you, Farah. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Pleasure.